In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to wire up our Android application to Google Analytics. So we'll look at how to actually set up your project, what dependencies you need, and so forth to get the Google Analytics SDK integrated. We'll look at the code, how we can post events and other information up to Google Analytics. And we'll also go online and take a look at our Google Analytics instance where we've actually pushed this data and show you how you can view it online.
All right, so what I'm going to do tonight is kind of carry on from our last example code. So we looked at this Top Tracks app last time when we talked about async tasks and network programming. And so what I want to do tonight is take that same application and show you how I've wired it up to Google Analytics. So the first thing you've got to do is you got to go and get that Google Analytics library. And so I put a link in the view graphs to it. The other thing you can do, of course, is just search for it. So if I say Android Google Analytics like that, the top link here is going to be that library. And here it is. And to start it, I want to download the Google Analytics SDK, and it's this zip file right here. So I'm going to download that, and it drops it down here, and I can go off and find this file, and there it is. And I've actually already downloaded it and unpacked it, and here's the jar file. And what you're going to do with this jar file, oops, I don't want that, is you're going to copy it into your project's libs directory. So I've already created one, but to create a directory, if you select your project and just say File New, and then you can say Folder, and then type in the name libs, and it's going to create the folder. Okay. So you're going to create that directory, which I've already done, and then you're simply going to take this file and drag it from your Explorer to the libs directory and drop it. Okay, now I've already done this, and so if you open my libs directory, there's that jar. Okay, now there's one other thing you're going to want to do. You're going to want to change, as Steve was just mentioning, your build path so that it knows it should be referencing this jar when you are building. So to do this, you're going to right click on the project here, and you're going to go down to build path, and it's configure build path. And on this window, you're going to go to the libraries tab, and you're going to say add jars, and you're going to navigate down to your libs directory in the project. I've already added that one, yeah. Yeah, thanks, Tim, that's why. So I've already put it in my build path, which you probably saw. Let me go back into there. It's too smart for its own good. Yeah, so it's already here in my build path. So I think that's why it didn't show that one as an option. It was the only thing in the directory, and it was already there. So why confuse the user? So Google's too clever. But yeah, so you'd select that, drag it in there, and that's it in terms of configuration stuff. Now you're ready to go into the code and wire it up. And I've done all this already to save us some time, but let's walk through the code. All right, so here is the initial command. Oh, by the way, I just updated to 1.4, the latest, and I believe this is now start session. Start new session. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, so the old one was deprecated. When you see things crossed out like that, It means it's deprecated in the new version. So I actually updated the library today and forgot to go back through and clean those up. So we're going to start a new session. And here is my tracking code. And where I got this is out of the Google Analytics dashboard on the web. So let's go over there once and see where I got that. So I'm going to go to Google Analytics. So that's under google.com/analytics. And I'm going to sign in. And since I was here already, it had my credentials cached. You'll have to log in the first time or hit the create button. And I've got 2 accounts set up. And the one we were looking at here is the one that ends in a 1, so that would be this account. So if I go down into this app, in order to find the tracking code, you can go to the admin panel, and then under admin, you'll see tracking code, and this is your tracking code. So you're going to copy that, and you're going to go back to your code, and you're going to paste it over my code right there. If you leave this in and you run it, you won't see the analytics in your end. It's going to go to my instance, my test instance here. The next 2 lines here are useful for development. So one of the things you might want to do is just suppress. You might want to have all the code that sends the analytics, but when you're doing development, you just want to suppress it. Okay, so one of the things you can do is have a separate tracking code for development and just keep it turned on all the time. The other thing you could do is just say, well, whenever I'm in debug mode, I'm going to set debug to true on my analytics object. And what that will do is it will send additional data out. So if we turn this on, then Google Analytics is going to tell us exactly when it's transmitting the data. So in Logcat, we can see some additional stuff that Google Analytics is doing. The set dry run says, okay, go through all the motions, but stop short of transmitting it up to the network. So if I want to call everything and have all my APIs working, but I don't want the data to actually get transmitted, I can turn this on. So if I set dry run mode, it's going to gather all the data. It's just not going to wire it and send it up to the network. Okay? So I've taken these guys and I've wired them up to that debug mode on, which I showed you a little earlier this evening, and I've implemented that method down here at the bottom. And what it's going to do is simply look at that attribute inside my manifest. If it's true, it's going to set dry run mode and debug mode, and it's going to give me extra data, and it's not going to send it to the network. Okay, so those are useful optional commands that you can use. All right, so we've looked at this code last time, and it's really unchanged other than the Google Analytics. So what I want to do is just skip down and point out a few places where I've hooked up calls to this tracker. So one of the things I do is in the on resume, okay, so anytime my app becomes visible, my activity becomes visible, I'm going to track a page view to top tracks activity, because that's the name of my activity, and you can pick whatever you want. That's the convention I'm using. So whenever this thing becomes visible partially or fully, the first time it's going to basically send up this page view. And then when I go to destroy, it's going to call stop, and I think I need to call stop session to conform to the new API. Okay, and the other thing I need to do is in that button where you click after you've selected the city, you click this go button, and I go off to Last.fm. I've actually wired up an event to that. So here's my tracks button, And when you click that button, I'm going to fire off an event. And that data is going to get stored as a record up on Google Analytics. So I can see how many times that button was pressed. And I also had some buttons in the detailed view. You remember we had the custom list view adapter, and I had some buttons in there. You could click on the artist button, it would show up the artist, and if you clicked on the entry itself, it would show up the song page on Last.fm. So that was over in the custom list adapter. So if we go down to my adapter, down here on those two buttons, I've also wired up events. So if you click the artist button, I send up an action, artist button, sorry, and if you if you clicked on the item, then I'm sending up track item because you're interested in the track data. And that was it. So really about 5 or 6 calls to this tracker, and now my entire Top Tracks app is now wired up and ready to send analytics. Let's go to the manifest, and let's make sure that debugging is turned on. And then let's go ahead and run it. So it's false right now. I'm going to set this to true. And let's go ahead and run the app. Oh, it's got to start an emulator. Well, I'm going to go ahead and run it on my device here. Well, no, I'm not, because when I run it on the device, I don't have the network set up, and I won't be able to send the data. Let's take this one. And then I'm going to get my logcat visible here. So here's my logcat output. And what we'll do, so I'm in debug mode now, so I set that attribute to true. And what I want to do now is run the app and exercise the interface and then look at what kind of debug output Google Analytics is generating. Starting up. Okay, so now the app is running. I'm in debug mode. So if I come down here and I say, let's go for Orlando, and if I push the top tracks, notice so far I don't see anything in there about Google Analytics so far. But that doesn't mean Google Analytics hasn't done anything. What's that? Oh. Thank you, Tom. And then I got to pick the right device too, and I'm thinking this looks like the physical device. Let me go to DDMS to make sure we're looking at the right terminal. Okay, so there's that. Okay, that looks better. And it actually does have Google Analytics. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily, it's going to do this every, I think I had it set at every 20 seconds or whatever. So exactly when I do it doesn't necessarily mean that's when the event is going to show up in the log. But you can see that it's already sent up one thing, but I'm in debug mode here, so there's actually nothing to send. So if I say top tracks, I click the button, and now it's loading a bunch of data, so all my log messages are there. And if we scroll back a little, okay, I don't see the event. It probably still has to show up. Oh, there it is, right there. Okay, so when we hit that 20-second threshold, it actually pushes the data again. So all the analytics are being queued up, and then every 20 seconds it's checking to see if it has anything to dispatch. Okay, but obviously, and there's a button press. So again, there's Google Analytics output there for that button press. Okay, but nothing's going up because I have dry run mode set true. So let me go back into the manifest. and set that to false. Okay, so now I should get a couple things. The debug output's going to be suppressed now, and it's also going to start transmitting the data for real up to the analytics engine. And just to prove that, let's go ahead and if you're in the home screen, so this is the app, it's going to open up under standard reporting. So this is where you're going to open up when you first click on your app. If you go over to home, and then the first thing up here in the upper left nav bar is your real-time data. And if we go there, there's nobody on here right now. But if we go in and run the app again, okay, so now the app's loaded. And it takes a couple seconds. Let me just start interacting with it. Okay, there we go. So we got one user on the site, that would be me. And if we log down, scroll down here, it's actually showing me where this user is right now. So if you guys started running the same app, and there'd be multiple people from Grand Rapids. So you can see really quickly here what's going on. And then eventually, there's no data in here right now. Well, let me just see if I've got, let me just quickly log us into a site where we got real data. All right, so here's a live analytics engine for Laker Mobile. So you can see each day how many visitors, how many people have ran the app. So over on Friday, June 15, we had a little mountain peak there. I'm not sure why. 156 people used it. And we could go down and see some stuff about the network, like where are these people coming from, different providers. So we got a lot of Sprint users, Sprint Nextel, Service Provider Corp. I think this is the provider that AT&T leases from. Here's Verizon. This looks like Germany. So I don't know if we got some exchange students over there or something that are running the app. Here's Grand Valley's Wi-Fi. Okay, so you can actually see kind of what network, what wireless network your users are coming in on. And Google's detecting that from the IP address. So if you know what network they're on, that might tell you things about your users. We got a lot of Sprint users versus Verizon and so forth. What's that? Only Verizon would do that. This one's kind of neat. New versus returning. So you can see what proportion of your users are new versus returning. Engagement. This is reality here, but this is kind of at first it blew me away, but you typically got users for about 10 seconds. This is very, very common when you run your apps. People's attention span on their phone when they're running apps is really, really short. They want to quick come in and do something, check something quick, and get back out again. So 99.64% of our visitors only were running the app for 10 seconds or less. So you don't have a lot of time to get the user's attention.
What could they have done 10 seconds or less on there? Just curious.
Well, I think what happens is a lot of times the app will already be loaded because it's Android. They'll touch it on the launcher, and they'll quick look at the tweet streams. They'll do a refresh on it. They'll look at the news articles. They have the app on a page that they're interested in, and they'll look, oh, nothing new, and they'll go away again. Think about it yourself sometimes. It's hard to think about yourself and how you use things, but think about how quickly you flit around between apps. Like, oh, I better check in on Foursquare. I'm in this restaurant. And that takes all of 10 seconds or less. And you do it. Or you pull up your Facebook app and you go to the news feed and you just check the top 5 or 6 entries. A lot of times that'll take you 15, 20 seconds or less. And so it's very usual for people to come on your app, use it for a very limited amount of time, and then go away. So anyways, there's lots and lots of different things you can look at here in your data. It's quite interesting. Very easy to get lost in and spend hours.